Group Five's Air and Space presentation by Matt Insani, Justice Young, Audrey Miller, Santa Suri, Noah Samf, and Jared Lazo. My name is Matt Insani, and I will be starting off the first slide by summarizing what the AI originally argued in response to the prompt about whether the government should spend billions on Mars missions while climate change and poverty remain unsolved. The AI's position is that doing so raises serious ethical concerns. It uses a utilitarian approach, suggesting that the government spending should create the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and the funding Mars exploration fails that test. It also argues that the opportunity cost is too high. Every dollar invested in Mars is a dollar not invested in urgent problems like renewable energy, social welfare, healthcare, and education. The AI stresses that climate change is an immediate existential risk and that poverty still affects millions. Its overall conclusion is that exploration is valuable, but should be delayed until Earth's crises are meaningfully addressed. On the second slide, I will break down my own evaluation of the AI's response. What the AI does well is it presents a clear ethical framework and explains the opportunity cost effectively. It also uses a persuasive and balanced tone, but there are also some weaknesses. It doesn't include any concrete data or examples, like NASA's actual budget or the cost of a Mars mission, which would make this argument stronger. It also fails to address counterarguments, such as how space technology actually helps with climate monitoring or innovation on Earth. Finally, it repeats similar ethical claims without going deeper into how government budgeting actually works. So, overall, the response is strong in its ethics but lacks depth, evidence, and
Hi
nuance.
guys, my name is Justice, and today I'll be summarizing the main points from AI's response to the ethical question of whether we should spend billions on Mars missions while problems like climate change and poverty remain unresolved. AI argues that Mars exploration isn't just purely a luxury, but it actually creates indirect benefits for Earth. Programs like NASA's Artemis initiative and SpaceX's Starship development lead to innovation in renewable energy storage, robotics, advanced solar panels, water purification systems, and the satellite technology we use today for climate monitoring. So, space exploration can act as both scientific advancement and humanitarian investment. But AI also points out the ethical tension. Although these long term benefits are real, the opportunity costs are immediate. NASA's budget is around 25 billion, with roughly 3 billion going specifically towards Mars. While Earth still faces urgent needs, because of that, AI concludes that the issue isn't just black and white, but Mars funding is neither fully justified nor fully irresponsible. Instead, it becomes a test of whether humanity can pursue discovery without ignoring each other. On my second slide, I focused on evaluating the quality of AI's response. The reasoning was coherent and logically structured, and using ethical frameworks made the argument stronger. For example, utilitarianism supports space exploration if it leads to innovations that benefit everyone, while Kantian ethics would say we have a duty to address human suffering first. Then there's the personal moral perspective, that the best approach balances curiosity with compassion. What really stood out is that AI pushed a non-middle ground. It didn't take a hard stance for one against Mars funding, but instead showed how ethical exploration is possible as long as it's paired with policies that prioritize equity and human needs.
So, for my follow up response, my main goal was to get ChatGPT to assert itself both objectively and morally. And so, to do this, I used a lot of hyper specific language. I asked ChatGPT to state the percentage of the US budget spent on Mars exploration, quantify the number of people lifted above the poverty line if this percentage were instead allocated to poverty reduction, and determine if this reallocation of funds is ethically superior. ChatGPT's response provided some interesting insight into how AI functions. I found that AI is very effective at providing concrete data and calculations. So, a couple of pieces of information that I did not know are that the current budget for NASA is about 0.37% of the US federal spending, and that the reallocation of funds would lift approximately 1.2 million people above the poverty line. However, ChatGPT and AI tends to have some shortcomings when it comes to moral discussions. So, one way that this happens is through oversimplification and an inability to critically utilize ethical frameworks. So, one way that you see this is through the use of buzzwords. My response ended up saying something along the lines of lifting people above the poverty line will maximize overall happiness and improve many more lives. And I found that these phrases oversimplified the utilitarian framework and were only really included to match my prompt, but didn't necessarily use the utilitarian perspective in a meaningful way. ChatGPT also makes some illogical assumptions by claiming that raising people above the poverty line is going to improve lives. That's not necessarily true because other factors play into somebody's quality of life other than being impoverished or not. So the main takeaway is really that it's best to use AI for objective data, but definitely use it with some discretion when it comes to moral discussions.
My name is Audrey, and I furthered our exploration by asking ChatGPT prompt 5B. In 100 words or fewer, give the best reasons why the government should commit a sustainable portion of GDP, say 2% of GDP, to NASA for sustained space exploration, including a mission to Mars. Consider climate change and social problems. In response, ChatGPT said committing 2% of GDP to NASA would drive innovation, economic growth, and global leadership while addressing challenges like climate change. It also took the role that a sustained investment supports high-tech jobs, STEM education, and commercial partnerships that strengthen the economy. Additionally, ChatGPT claimed that balancing exploration with social programs isn't a trade-off, which is a definitive stance for ChatGPT to take, and it also knows that it's an investment in long-term scientific, environmental, and economic resilience that benefits current and future generations. In analyzing this argument, it's clear that ChatGPT makes an assertive argument that allocating 2% of GDP to NASA would produce a positive return to society. This position heavily emphasizes utilitarianism, suggesting that technical advancements will yield widespread public good. This shows that ChatGPT can't fully view the issue and all of its moral tensions. It doesn't understand the exploration between innovation and immediate human welfare. ChatGPT also assumes technological programs inherently benefit all people, which completely overlooks how innovation can often intensify economic inequality. This can happen because committing such a severe expense can divert funds away from pressing social needs like healthcare, housing, and education. ChatGPT makes a solid argument for the benefits of allocating GDP to NASA, however, it fails to view the whole picture of who it might disadvantage.
My name is Sana Suri, and I will be doing the first follow-up for Prompt 5B. From an ethical standpoint, could funding Mars exploration be justified if its long-term scientific and technological benefits outweighed the immediate costs? Consider how a utilitarian or Kantian perspective might evaluate the moral worth of committing 2% of GDP to NASA. ChatGPT's response was, this is justified if the technological innovation, climate change, and human survival maximize overall happiness and welfare. However, Kant's categorical imperative would argue that moral duty requires effectively addressing poverty and inequality, treating humanity as an end rather than a means to future progress. The ethical tension lies in weighing future-oriented scientific advancements against immediate moral obligations. Governments must balance innovation with compassion, ensuring exploration does not compromise moral responsibility toward those currently suffering on Earth. The analysis and evaluation was that this response oversimplifies both moral theories. It correctly contrasts utilitarianism's outcome-based reasoning with Kant's duty-based morality, but fails to explain how these frameworks might conflict in policymaking. A utilitarian quantifies benefits like renewable energy breakthroughs or global economic growth, while Kantian ethics would reject sacrificing current well-being for speculative gains. The response's abstract moral language lacks reliable evidence. It should reference data such as NASA's actual budget share to contextualize the ethical dilemma. Additionally, its neutral point of view avoids taking a clear ethical stance. A stronger response would evaluate which framework provides a more justifiable approach to government spending. Overall, the reasoning is coherent but philosophically thin and under evidence, showing AI's tendency to summarize ethics rather than apply it critically.
I'm Noah, and I did the 5B second follow-up, and my prompt was about widening the inequality on Earth and the Mars colonization risks that. And this is my prompt. In 100 words or fewer, argue whether the prioritization of Mars colonization risks widening equality on Earth. Should NASA be required to dedicate a fixed share of its 2% GDP budget to solving terrestrial crises like climate displacement or energy poverty? And ChatGPT's response focused on these four things. Firstly, mandating Earth First funding. Allocating 2% of the GDP, a strict 30% of the budget must be a social dividend. So strengthening the foundation of Earth, specifically before we prioritize space exploration. Prevent space elitism. Must not deepen the wealth gap. Okay, prevent space elitism. The exploration must not deepen the wealth gap. Technological channels must intentionally be directed towards marginalized populations to ensure space access doesn't become exclusive for the domain of the wealthy. So basically, it's just talking about how it needs to bring equality and not inequality. applying Rawlsian justice. It's basically talking about how it should benefit the most vulnerable people on Earth and the least advantaged, making sure that the least advantaged population is taken care of in this pursuit. And lastly is just redefining success and making sure that we're building the foundation for we're moving to the stars, if that makes sense. And then this is my analysis of the ChatGPT prompt. I think it eliminates vague generalizations. Before it was, like you said, it was like blathering on, and it was wandering a bit more, but this one has more concise, high-impact argument structures. It incorporates hard metrics, like 30% of the GDP. It defines actionable programs, specifically like the Earth-facing initiatives, climate monitoring, renewable energy, and all that. It applies a robust ethical framework at Rawlsian justice. It directly resolves the feedback that was given by the instructor before, and it synthesizes policy with ethics. And yep, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, we're looking forward to your feedback. And thank you so much.